what is blockchain and cryptocurrency. First of all, we have to start from the very beginning, essentially from the DLTs. DLT means digital ledger technology. A ledger is essentially a file, a book, which records transactions, nothing more than that. Of course, it's digital, so it's on the machine. In fact, even at the University of Malta, we have a center of distributed ledger technologies. So one of these technologies, an example of DLTs, is the blockchain. And we've all heard about the blockchain. So essentially, a blockchain is very simply a block of data which is connected together with a sort of chain, hence where the name comes from. So imagine, just to be very simplistic, you have a suitcase, we fill it up with information, and when it is filled, we tie it up to another suitcase. And we keep on doing like that in order to create our blockchain. Now, this blockchain makes use of something called cryptography, which is essentially a mathematical technique which is used to secure information. So if I would like to send information from myself to yourself, but a third party intercepts that information, thanks to cryptography, of course, he will not manage to understand that information. And one of the applications of the blockchain is precisely cryptocurrency. So essentially, it is the currency which makes use of cryptography and, of course, is built on top of the blockchain. In fact, one of the most famous kinds of cryptocurrency, so very similar to our normal currencies like the euros and the dollars, but which is, of course, built upon the blockchain, is the Bitcoin. And the Bitcoins are these digital coins which you can transfer from one person to another in a digital way. But of course, it's not the only one. There are various others like the Ethereum. There's the Libra, which Facebook is going to release very soon. In fact, they just changed the name to Diem. And there are other loads of virtual coins which you can use to exchange money or other sort of transactions.
At some point over the last couple of years, I mean, Malta was hailed as a blockchain island. What went wrong?
I think one of the issues was sort of the risk for the first mover. You know, we were quite avant-garde when it came to the technology. And when you're exploring this uncharted territory, then of course there are a lot of risks associated with it. We had a good legislation, which was quite advanced. However, there's always this balance which you have to reach between giving due diligence to the companies which operate in the crypto market vis-a-vis the space to actually work within that market. And sometimes finding that balance between all the checks and balances which you have to make vis-a-vis all the applications of these cryptocurrencies is quite hard. Of course, then there was the issue of the pandemic as well, which didn't help, and it complicates matters further. But I think when you get the combination of all these different elements, it's the cause of some of the problems which we were having in the past year.
Do you see an opportunity for this sector in Malta to flourish in the future?
Well, I think blockchain in general has a lot of potential, and definitely I believe that it will have a lot of applications in the future. Of course, we have to keep in mind that it's very much an embryonic state. I mean, if we just look at Bitcoin, it was only invented in 2008. So you know, the technology still needs to evolve further. Of course, the pandemic did not help at all, and because of the pandemic, we had these issues. But there were actually some companies which actually started accepting Bitcoin. I know of a co-working space in Valletta which you could rent for Bitcoin. So you could actually pay to have this co-working space for you. There were Bitcoin ATMs. There were even some restaurants which were accepting Bitcoins. Some car importers, and also a cab company. And these were all based in Malta. So as you can see, some people were entrepreneurial when it came to Bitcoin. Of course, the biggest problem with Bitcoin is that its value fluctuates a lot. So you have to be very careful, sort of that you accept a certain amount of Bitcoin vis-a-vis the equivalence of euro currency, but then when you go to exchange it, you might get much less than that. So there's still this risk which we have to overcome. But definitely, I see a lot of potential for Bitcoin and blockchain technology in general.
And what would you say to local retailers about Bitcoin?
Okay, so
Bitcoin, because I mean that's the one that's obviously being used most in Malta.
No, of course, in general, I think, as I said, it's still a technology which is still evolving, but definitely I think they should start looking at these new ways of doing businesses, especially because there are other opportunities which they should consider. For example, one of them is not really Bitcoin, but the Ethereum, which allows for smart contracts. So the nice thing about it is that you can create these digital contracts. So imagine I have a transaction with yourself, maybe I bought a car from you, and thanks to these digital contracts, an amount of money will be transferred to your account automatically by the program. And it's the program which is actually doing all the checks and balances to ensure that the transaction actually happens and it's fine. So there are quite a number of advantages. Of course, they have to be very careful, especially because, as it was mentioned earlier, there are quite a number of scams as well surrounding this ecosystem.
Have you seen any scams that are more common in Malta?
Yes, there have been quite a number. I can mention a few. For example, one of them is a trading scam. So you get a lot of hype around cryptocurrency and the idea that you can make a quick buck very easily. And this is due to the fact that, especially Bitcoin has been fluctuating quite a lot. If you look at Bitcoin in 2015, it was around 400 euros per Bitcoin. In 2018, it went up to 17,000 euros per Bitcoin. So you can understand why there was a lot of hype. So you get a lot of people that are advertising these schemes to get rich quickly, when in reality, once you put in that money, then it can become quite hard to get your money back out of it. There's been also some scams related to COVID. For example, there were some people advertising the COVID vaccine, that you could actually get this vaccine before anyone else. But of course, you have to pay in Bitcoin. And why Bitcoin? Because they're very hard, if not impossible, to trace. So people were selling fake COVID vaccines via Bitcoins. There was also a work from home scheme whereby they were getting people to work, giving them a fake job, through which they were transferring money. And this money had to be transferred back to the organization that was fakely employing you via Bitcoin. The idea was that they were actually laundering the money coming from illicit activities. So, of course, people lost the money they were given, but they were also taking part in this money laundering activity. And another important and quite popular scam as well is the blackmail scam. Some people received an email saying that they broke the law or they did something illegal and that law enforcement was after them. But of course, they could be free from the jail sentence if they were to transfer a certain amount of money in Bitcoin. So as you can see, these schemes are varied. And remember, since a lot of people were staying at home, so a lot of these criminals now started to target the online world, and especially those people that were online.
And finally, just very briefly, how is the sector regulated in Malta?
Okay, so the sector is regulated by the MFSA. Of course, there are some very strict regulations, especially because since Bitcoin is money which is very difficult, if not impossible, to trace, then if it is not regulated well, then there might be issues related to money laundering or even other crimes. So that is why it is heavily regulated. And of course, as I said earlier, it's always an issue of finding the right balance between the regulation, but also allowing operators to work in our market and, of course, beyond as well.
Thank you very much, Professor, for joining our program tonight. Thank you. Thank you very much for watching. Once again, that was Professor Alexei Dingli from the University of Malta. He's a specialist in artificial intelligence. I'll be with you at the same time next week. Should you have any queries, as usual, direct them to Net Television or to myself via my blogs. Good evening.